Risk managers say that once risks have been identified and assessed, there are 4 possible ways to deal with it: risk avoidance, reduction, risk sharing, and retention. Could you briefly describe each of these options and tell us which one you would first adopt in a recession, for example?
One of the beauties of risk management is you're deploying it when you have when you're setting out a strategy. You're deploying it when you have defined objectives and set direction. And you're putting in risk management to try and make sure that you achieve those objectives. And so you move in deploying risk management, you need to constantly scan the environment that you're operating in. So if it's the government that's coming out with strategy, then you're looking at the environment within the country. If it's a corporation, then you're looking at the internal and external environment in which the corporation is operating. And so when you scan the environment, you're trying to forecast or identify possible risks into the future. And when you identify those risks, therein comes in the quasi-science, which is learned on how to try and measure those risks. In measuring those risks, you have various tools for measuring and assessing those risks. And when you assess them, you're looking at, because you're being probabilistic into the future, you're saying, okay, what is the probability of this happening to affect the objectives I've set? And what's the impact or damage or variation that will cause against the objective that I've set? And when you look at those, you're constantly measuring those two. And the combination of that helps you size out the risk. But the risks that you find that are huge probability of occurrence, and the impact in terms of damage to those objectives, to the strategy I've set, is high, then maybe I want to see how I can get them out of the way. So I want to avoid them. Okay? Then those that I find that the probability of occurrence is low, but the impact or consequence could be very large, I can see how to share. So various strategies for the various pockets of risk. But it's important to realize that what we've just done is futuristically, against the strategic plans we've come up with and the objectives, I'm constantly trying to measure the risks, and I put them into those boxes, and each box has how I deal with it. So that's how it works.
You talked about the civil service a while ago. Bureaucracy is the word that's often associated with everything negative: red tapeism, inefficiency, especially in the context of public sector service delivery. But you've been quoted as saying that bureaucracy is not necessarily a bad thing. How can the civil service preserve bureaucracy without stifling efficiency and effectiveness?
One thing you would observe about bureaucracy, the positive side of it is process, methodology, organization. That's the good side of it. And as long as we keep the good side of it, you have perfect. And so when we talk about the positive side of bureaucracy, that can create that systematic approach that supports strategy implementation. But when that becomes a stall, and you're running through this strategy and you're not making movement, and there's so much motion without movement, and to a large extent those are some of the negatives we've seen in our Nigerian space. Plenty of work on strategy, very little movement, and so the bureaucracy itself becomes a sort of risk, to the actualization of defined objectives and strategic plans that have been resolved. And that's why in some of the plans that are emerging, my big question is, where is the framework to forecast the risk that faces all of this, and to make sure that the bureaucracy is positively supportive in identifying and mitigating those risks, to make sure that we achieve movement.
So how can we improve the existing structure of public service to meet the country's development goals, and where do you see the greatest room for improved efficiency in the public sector?
I think that we need to look at what the rest of the world is doing. For us, if I go by your initial question, when you talk about risk management in Nigeria today, people remember the financial services sector, and to some extent oil and gas. And there may be a few sectors here and there. But if you look at global economies, you're seeing risk management in the public sector. Various arms of the public sector.
What should they be doing differently?
What are they doing is that they're setting up arms, universities, governments, post office, health sector. You set up the risk management framework. You institutionalize risk management. And risk management becomes that body that while strategy is running, risk management is that radar that is helping strategy look into the future. So the setting up of risk management frameworks, the adoption of risk management within public sector and institutionalizing within public sector will be very supportive in actualizing, reducing the negative part of bureaucracy and enhancing the transformational achievements expected of our strategic plans.